Recorded in sinfully sunny Las Vegas, Nevada, Avant Pop Bookstore presents Joining us now on this episode of Avant Pop Bookstore Presents is Polly Whitaker. Polly's work is a celebration of human sexuality, pleasure, empowerment, and experimentation. Her expansive approach includes writing, sculpture, immersive space events, and performances. Her book, Polly, Sex, Culture, Revolutionary, a Memoir, is out now. Joining us, Polly Whitaker. Polly, welcome.
Hi.
Thanks for coming on. I'm so excited.
I'm
so
happy
excited.
to be here in your weird little confessional booth.
That's what they call it. Yeah, that's exactly what they call it. It used to be a dressing room, and now it's more of a confessional.
It's perfect.
Yeah. I've been reading your book.
Oh, yeah?
And I've read your book. Wow, there's so much history that we've crossed paths with that I had no idea. And it put a lot of context into the stories that I had heard over the years,
right?
Or scenes that I had kind of been around at that time.
Yeah, because we've known each other for
20
years. Yeah.
New Year's Eve is my first kinky salon party that I went to.
Oh, cool.
And
what year?
20. Yeah. Those
the aughts.
Exactly. But I mean, I'd always known that you had done fashion. And I was in the fashion back then. I was in the fashion industry, so I was like, I had a connection with that. And then I knew Dirty Magicians and hardcore DJs, Paul Nathan and Aaron Dillashaw. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what brought me into the Anon Salon, which is where I met Scott first, Leckhoff, and then with the Kinky Salon, because you guys, I believe at that time, had just peeled off from, or at least Scott had, from the Anon Salon, from my story. So this is, so here's the story that I heard. That Scott was part of the Anon Salon, and then he wanted to do a little something kinkier, and that's how Kinky Salon.
No.
So okay, good. Tell me, because I read your book and I was like, wait, this is not what I was like.
No.
Yeah, there was so much insight into your book.
It had nothing to do with the Anon Salon. That was a complete coincidence.
Okay.
No. I mean, Scott. He was involved at somewhat doing performances and stuff, but I don't think he was ever involved in the organizing side of the Anon Salon. Okay. No, the Kinky Salon came out of there was a big fetish party happening in San Francisco, the Fetish Ball. Yeah. I think it was called. How original naming of that. And we were like, let's do something as like a little pre-event. So the night before we threw a little salon. Yeah. Because there were all these people in town, and because we thought it would be fun to throw like a kinky salon. Yeah. And so it was really just that one, that we were just going to do one of those, and then they throw another fetish ball, and we were like, hey, that went really well last time. Let's throw another kinky salon. And then people just loved it, and so we just kept doing it. And it kind of developed into its own thing. Oh, yeah. I was actually throwing events in San Francisco called Rubbish.
Yes.
And Rubbish was a rubber, because I was making latex clothes specifically. Yeah. And so Rubbish was my attempt to kind of like get the kink community more actively into latex, which really it wasn't that much into at that time, and it really still isn't. So like West Coast really isn't that into latex, generally speaking. That's a huge generalization. I apologize to all you West Coast latex fetishists listening to this, but so I was just trying to push my clothes and create more of a scene around what I was doing. And so Kinky Salon kind of developed from that. But it was definitely, Scott was definitely doing kink events. He was doing collaborations with people when I met him in like 1999, 2000. And so it made sense for us to start throwing events together.
Yeah. Well, and I love the fact that you got the Mission Control, the place that you were throwing the parties at, through Flash. Which,
Yeah.
I mean, Flash to me is the ultimate San Francisco. Oh, he's like the Hunter S. Thompson.
That's a good. That's a good
of,
impression.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He my favorite. He had the best MDMA, and back then he was getting it from these Jews they smuggle it over in their hats, and then they made a movie about it, which
Wow.
I was blown away because he got some amazing shit. It was all from these Jewish rabbis who smuggle it over in their hats.
Wow.
And, yeah.
I don't know that story, but I love Flash. He's still a good friend of mine. I've known him for many, many years. He was such a mover and shaker, helping people helping people to make things happen in the Bay Area. And at the time, the place was actually, it used to be known as the Jewelry Store. So before it was Mission Control, it was a space called the Jewelry Store, and Scott was involved with that. Scott used to be with the Jewelry Store, which was a bunch of people that were throwing parties and doing underground weird shit and making shit happen. And it was the shop front used to be a jewelry store, which is why they called it the Jewelry Store. And then it had been a .com office, because it was that time, 2001, 2002, where the guy who was renting it basically sublet it for like 10 times as much as he was renting it for in this boom, and then lost those tenants. I can't remember how that happened, but then it was kind of lying empty, and Flash was like, I'm gonna go over here and just show it to you. Like, he wasn't even showing it to me. It was my birthday. That was it. This is all in the book. It was my birthday, and he was taking me to a hot springs for the day. And he was just like, let's just stop in here. I've got to show some circus freaks this place because they're interested. And that was actually the Xenodrome people.
Yes.
So all interlacing, interconnected scenes in San Francisco. These words will mean nothing to you if you're not from the Bay Area in the 2000s. But for those who were, everyone will be like, oh my God, that one? Oh my God, that one?
And if you buy Polly's book, Polly, Sex Culture Revolution, it's all in there, which I loved because there were so many points of my history being in that scene that I didn't know.
I love that.
And yeah, it really put a lot of things together for me. But I want to go back too, because your childhood.
Oh, yeah, my
that
childhood.
was. I mean, your parents were amazing. Your father, a hot air balloonist.
Yeah.
Your mother, a sex counselor.
Yeah.
And it really set the base of who you became. But I mean, that's some amazing stuff right there.
Yeah, I had a very liberal upbringing by very creative parents who had like a weird scene going on in London in the 70s. And, I feel really blessed in a lot of ways. My childhood was really, really amazing until my father was diagnosed with cancer when I was 9. And then my life kind of fell apart, like my childhood came to an abrupt end. I had to be a grown up. And that really, I put it all in the book. It's interesting because when I first started writing this book, I was writing stories about Kinky Salon. I was writing specifically stories about how to throw a kinky salon. Right. And I discovered that when I was doing these workshops teaching other people how to throw kinky salons, that when I told the stories behind why we did it the way we did it, that was when I saw people really light up. Storytelling really engages people in learning. And so I was like, I'm going to write a manual. And so I started writing this manual. And then I reached this kind of writer's block where I just didn't know what to write about next. And I was taking a lot of writers' workshops and learning how to write a book while I was writing a book, as you do for your first book. And one of my teachers said to me, don't worry about what you're writing. Don't worry about this book for a minute. Just let it flow. And that was when I wrote about my father's death. And that was, I read it and I cried, and I reread it and I cried, and I was like, this is the most powerful stuff that I've ever written. And I was like, maybe this is actually what this is about. Like, maybe I have to tell the truth and the hard stories that brought me to the place where I am, because it's all part of the story of Kinky Salon. Yeah. And I realize in this moment, as we're talking, that we haven't actually explained what Kinky Salon is.
No.
We're just kind of assuming that everyone's in the know.
If
you know, you know.
And I gotta say, the story you're writing is very organic. Like everything, it's the synchronicity throughout. Like how your life has been playing out is it's beautiful, and it's really lovely to read your book and hear that how you came to America, how all these things kind of just flowed from the Fremont Street
Folsom Street
Fair. Yeah,
Fremont Street's Vegas.
Yeah, I get confused.
Folsom Street Fair. Yeah.
So so I the first time I met you was a New Year's Eve party at Mission Control, and Kinky Salon was a play party, basically.
Yeah. I mean, I will actually expand on that a little bit, because there's a lot of assumptions about what we mean by the term play party. The term play party didn't even really exist when we started throwing a Kinky Salon. It was just a place where, for me, where people could express themselves. And we're adults, and it was like a very art-centered, very creativity-centered. I mean, we were also doing immersive experiences before immersive experiences was really a thing back in the early 2000s, and so it was a lot of things. It's not an orgy. It's not just a play party. If you go to Kinky Salon looking for a play party, you'll probably be disappointed. People joke that Kinky Salon is the sex party where you don't get laid.
Yeah, that was kind of I loved it for the culture and the art scene and the group of people that were always there. I don't think I ever had sex there. I just went to hang out with people who were having sex in one room and then conversing in the other. So, and the art gallery was really nice with culture.
Yeah, so it had a bunch of things going on, and it kind of developed over the years. You know, it started out being more of a kink thing, and then it just expanded. And my catchphrase was always give the people what they want, you know? And like, I just kept being like, when we throw theme parties with really silly themes, people seem to really like that. Maybe we should do that for every party. And hey, when we opened up that room and said, fine, this is the sex area, it was packed. Like, maybe we should open up more of the space and say you can have sex in here. We used to have a hilarious sign in the lobby that said nudity is permitted, but please no genitals on the furniture, which I really enjoyed. I would follow people around with paper towels and put them down. Say, excuse me. So, you know, it's been a lot of changes and movements, and it took a few years to kind of reach the formula that we know now today. And we just celebrated our 21-year anniversary of Kinky Salon this weekend. I was in Oakland. At Mission Control, which is no longer in the Mission and no longer in the building that Flash hooked me up with. I remember when that happened. Because we were pushed out of San Francisco, like everything cool has been pushed out of San Francisco, sadly, including me and you. That's why we're in Vegas. But, I mean, Vegas isn't just a place that I landed, though. I do love this city, too. I'm not just here for the cheap rent. I do love this city,
you've been coming here doing fashion shows for a long time.
For a long time. And just enjoying the weirdness of this town. You know, it's so strange. There's no city like Vegas.
It reminds me a lot of the Bay Area when we did have pop-ups, when we did have street stuff that, you know, you can go crazy. In fact, my first experience at Burning Man was you can't smoke dope in the camp. And I was like, wait a minute, I can smoke dope on the streets of San Francisco, and now you're telling me the one place at Burning Man that was supposed to be free?
Right.
So San Francisco had a whole vibe to it for a really long time.
It did. It was a wonderful place, and I realized that I was homesick. I realized that I was homesick in San Francisco. I realized that I was like living my life being homesick for a place that didn't exist anymore. And I was just like, you know, I really appreciate all the people that are still there and still holding it down. Scott's still there. Scott Levkoff is doing events there, and he just did an amazing pop-up event called the Wonkyverse, where he like did this crazy Willy Wonka event with like a game board as the dance floor, and I don't know, just he's still doing it. He's still doing it and like clinging on to the Bay, and I appreciate all the people, including the Mission Control people. Even though it's Oakland now, Oakland is now officially cooler than San Francisco because all of the people that were pushed out of San Francisco are now in Oakland, which I really struggled with at first, moving to Oakland for Mission Control, because I was like, you know what, San Francisco is the home of the sexual revolution.
Right.
Like, we belong in San Francisco. If Kinky Salon can't exist in San Francisco, then where does it go? You know? But Oakland actually has become a really interesting city because it's joined together the two cultures. The Oakland culture, which is real and there and absolutely 100% part of the Bay Area history. The Black Panthers, super diverse, interesting, cool, cultural activism and culture changing and really, really important. And then you bring all of the freaks that used to be in San Francisco, who still are flooding to San Francisco from, Bum Pass, Virginia, or wherever, coming to San Francisco being like, is this the place where I can be free? Like, kind of, it's just across there now.
Which I love that about your book, because you capture scenes of the sexual revolution throughout your book. And I thought that was a nice addition to what your story is. And you do a really good job of it.
What, the back history?
The back history of how San Francisco has been part of the sexual revolution.
Yeah, well, I think that's really important. Yeah. And, a lot of people, when they start doing things, they think they're the first people to do it, Yeah. I know I did when I was in my 20s. Like, I'm so original. I mean, the kink scene in the 90s in London, like, nobody had ever seen anything like that before. That was wild, right? The birth of Torture Garden, Club Submission, all of these things that are now legendary, that are now kind of mainstream in London. Like, that stuff was wild. And then I moved to San Francisco thinking, yeah, I'm going to be crazy and wild and I'm going to do all of these things. And then I went to Folsom Street Fair and I was like, whoa, okay. And then I met people who became my mentors. I met Carol Queen and I met Annie Sprinkle and these people who had, just laid the foundation for the culture that I was part of, that I so appreciate, and I think it's really important to tell our stories and to keep that history known, because it's a really important part of our cultural history as humans, you know.
And you contributed a huge amount to that cultural history. You came in as a latex designer.
I did.
Which I believe in San Francisco, latex was happening a lot, but mainly in the gay community, and it wasn't as big as it blew up, which I got to say, latex is sweaty. I don't understand how people
let me
love
explain
it
it
so
to you.
much.
Let me explain it to you. Sure. Let me
Please,
explain it to you for a second.
Tell me, convince me.
So there are some people who are like, oh God, I don't like latex. It's so sweaty. How do you wear it? I don't know. And then there are other people who are like, latex is hot and sweaty.
Yeah.
Right? That's the difference.
Yeah.
You either love it or you don't. Yeah. And the experience of wearing it is really erotic for some people, and the experience of wearing it for other people is not erotic. And that's okay.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And it looks
fantastic.
Amazing. And there are some people who are like, I don't like the way it feels, but I'm willing to put up with it.
Which is, a lot of people that I knew that were. In fact, I was one of those people. I loved it, but everybody thinks it's sexy until you start taking it off after a long day.
Right.
It just,
take it off in the shower. That's what I always used to tell people. Nice. Take it off in the shower. Get into the shower wearing your latex. Take your latex off. It's much easier to take off in running water. Give it a little rinse and hang it up, and then you're good, and you're good too. Yeah.
I like that. That.
That's my hot tip for the day.
You help produce amazing events in San Francisco. Some of probably the most legendary. In fact, I think Kinky Salon's right there for underground parties in San Francisco. There was a handful that really set the stage. Anon Salon was one, and Kinky Salon was another. And you helped bring that to the fruition, and it was huge for a lot of us out there wanting to explore and find a creative venue. But it wasn't just. I mean, like you said, art was a big part of it. Like you put a lot of energy into, you and Scott put a lot of energy into designing an atmosphere that was very creative and artistic.
Yeah.
It kind of blew up that way.
Yeah.
And that was alongside the whole Burning Man scene, right?
Yeah. And so my collaboration with Scott was really interesting in the early years, because I think it was really the result of the two of us coming together that created the unique thing that is Kinky Salon. It wouldn't have been the same without Scott. It wouldn't have had that depth and intention. I was very much into the humor and the fashion and the ridiculousness and making art. I mean, originally it came from my fashion shows. So I used to really enjoy doing the theatrics of a fashion show, and I would do wacky shit. Like I would do like protests where I'm like speaking about we're reclaiming the word pervert, and
I love that. I
people
love
with
that.
protest signs in the background. And I would create all of these fashion shows that were just really wacky and silly, and I was performing all over San Francisco and all over, I did it in Texas, in Vegas,
Yeah,
I did it all
Austin,
over the
yeah,
place,
yeah.
Seattle, and this was all before Kinky Salon.
Yeah.
And then I really enjoyed the theatrics and putting that into Kinky Salon. Scott brought a lot of the intention, a lot of the the little tweaks, like when you arrive at Burning Man, for example, and you're greeted, you're welcomed, and you're told what this party is about, right? That kind of thing. Scott, I hadn't been to Burning Man, and so Scott was the one who brought a lot of that stuff to join forces with what I was already doing, and I think our collaboration was really, really powerful for creating something that was really, really unique and magical, because it was coming from the kink scene in London, where I had experienced all these amazing transformational experiences and kind of mind-opening, mind-blowing, events, and come over here, and Scott was coming very much from the Burning Man, world, and so those things coming together was really, I think, really powerful. He hasn't been involved now for more than a decade, but
time slips by,
doesn't it, Schwa?
Jeez. Yeah.
But he was there on Saturday night in Oakland, which was great to see him, and it was such a magical night on Saturday night. Oh my goodness me, it was wonderful. The theme was clowns, which, as you know, is very close to my heart.
Of course, yes.
And
it's
so
all of us from the Bay Area.
yeah. So I was like, I don't know. Did this speech in the cabaret about because it was the first day of Pride Month,
Right.
June
Yeah.
1st. So I did this whole speech about how gender is really something from the last millennia, and like, what does Pride mean anymore? Like, what are we really proud of? And I was like, for me, my orientation is more about archetypes.
Yeah.
And for me, I will always be a clown sexual.
Well, and that's what I love throughout your book. It's activism. It kind of seems like the undertone of everything that you do. You're not only making a scene, but you're making a point. With,
in
whether
a
it's
different
sexuality, whether it's art, whether you're basically reminding people that sexuality is a freedom of expression, and all of it kind of combines with the.
Yeah. My activism is not of the kind that goes out and protests or that does political actions and stuff like that. I've always had, even though, everything that's going on in the world right now, I feel like we should be protesting a lot of shit that's going on. But ultimately, I feel like my activism affects, my community and my people. Like, I have this audience I'm not really trying to talk to the world so much as I used to be. Like, I used to have this thing of like, grow it. And then I realized that was kind of capitalist, and that I'm an anarchist, and like capitalism. And as soon as you start bringing structures and growth, all of a sudden I'm like, ugh, I just want to break it apart again, like, can we smash this to pieces now that we built it? So, so anyway, I'm, it's my journey as an activist, as an artist, as an entrepreneur, although I hate that word because I'm a terrible business person. I'm really, really, my focus has always been in all of these things, art. I announced when I was like 9 years old to my parents that I was going to be an artist. It's all I ever wanted to be, was be an artist. Yeah. And so I've lived my life with that, and the thing with being an artist as well that's so tricky is that artists will relate to this, is the constant, like, does what I do have value in the world? Does this matter? Is this important? Am I just being frivolous and pointless? What is the point of this stuff that I'm doing? And that cycle of like constantly like having to reevaluate yourself and find the courage within yourself to say, no, my art matters. I'm going to give this art to the world and see the world's response, because this dialogue that I'm having between my artistic creativity and the cultural, effects of it, and the way that culture is having a dialogue with me about the world through my art has value. It is making change. It is important, and it is culturally valuable. And the value of the artist is so important and so undervalued in America, particularly so undervalued. The lack of funding, the lack of support for artists in all forms.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have.
And you did a great job of doing, also bringing out in the beginning the satirical side of yourself with art and just kind of playing off of it all. One of the first flyers you met with the removing cum from the face, which I thought was brilliant.
Yeah, the facial cum remover.
Yeah.
It was a little wet wipe that I had personalized. So I bought a bunch of like little wet wipes from the CVS or whatever and made little labels for them that said facial cum remover and had a picture of me with a splooge of, it's actually ranch dressing. Yeah.
Which and by the way, Polly, you were like during that time frame. Peter Ackworth was doing at that, I think it was the Porn Palace before it was Kink.com, and you were part of that huge movement in San Francisco, which is historical. Like, I mean, your book tells a lot about it, but I gotta say, like, being on the outskirts and popping in and out of it all, it was pretty amazing for a lot of people, and you helped make all that happen. I think that's huge.
Well, thank you. I mean, I feel like it was a wild time. It was a wild time to be in San Francisco. But again, it's embedded within this bigger history of San Francisco, of sexual openness, of like a hedonistic culture with intention and activism. Like, all of this is so Bay Area, and no matter how wild the things that we were doing were, no matter how much we felt like we were making change compared to the folks who were there in the 70s. I mean, I hear stories from people like Ron Turner, who's also one of my mentors and beloved, elders in San Francisco.
Well, even Annie Sprinkle.
Annie Sprinkle, all of these things, all of these people really did lay a groundwork. We were standing on the shoulders of giants, and I think that's really important to keep saying, because as another generation of sex culture event producers and culture builders and community builders comes together in the Bay Area and all over, as sex culture becomes more democratized, because we have the internet and it can be anywhere now in much more of an easy way than it used to be, because you couldn't find it. There was no way to find people who were like-minded.
We had magazines back then.
We had,
those.
Kinky Salon, right? I used to hand out paper flyers.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't have the internet.
Right.
Well, I mean, we did, but only fucking nerds were on it.
It didn't work like it does now.
No, not in the same way at all. So, culture has changed so much. The world has changed so much in the last couple decades. It's kind of mind-blowing. And it's changed for the better in some ways. Like, it is great that we can connect and that we can share wisdom and do workshops. I mean, my God, the amount of workshops that they have on like polyamory and open relationships and kink, and I mean, you can really learn how to do these things in a way that we couldn't back in the day. We were making this shit up as we went along.
Totally.
There was no
polyamory was a weird word for people back in the day. They're like, is that like plastic?
Yeah, I remember when I first arrived in San Francisco, and that was one of the things was the word polyamory. I was like, oh, we just call it open. Open relationships, we called it in London.
Exactly.
What is this polyamory?
Yeah. Well, I want to circle back around to that, but before we get to that, because I think you have a lot of insight. People are always asking from when you're in a polyamorous or have been in polyamorous relationships, people always ask you, how do you make it happen? Which I want to touch on later. But before that, I think I want to know what brought you to Vegas now.
Well, I've always loved this city. I've always had just a soft spot for it. I think it's super weird and cool and strange, and It's the place where people in Americans, normal folks, come to be entertained. Yeah. And so there's a real possibility here for communicating to mainstream culture in a way. Not that I'm a mainstream person. I'm never going to be mainstream. Let's face it. Like, I am edgy as fuck, and I always will be. I want to just get weirder and weirder.
Thank you.
People, some people thought, whatever. Some people might think that I might be wanting to get more like bigger and more mainstream, but I really don't. I never have. I've been on a media lockdown. This is the first podcast that I've done in a really long time.
Yeah.
I did do one for Sunny Megatron, who does the American Sex podcast, because she was living here as well for a short while, and I just love her. So I was like, all right, I'll do one with you. But yeah, I don't tend to talk to the press. But anyway, back to Vegas. Why did I move here? So there was those reasons, just because I saw it as a really cool, interesting place. I was like, that's a place I could go. Like, as I'm looking at places that are possibilities for leaving the Bay Area, and this seemed like a good spot to find myself. It's also like Sin City, right? So it's like, interesting.
Really well,
I mean, the culture here around sexuality is really interesting, though. And I definitely had some really eye-opening experiences when I first moved here. I was working on a project called the Stripper Parade. So the idea was to create a parade for strippers and sex workers, almost like a pride parade. And I was working with the city, and I was really put a lot of time, energy, money, love, all of these things. I had a board of sex workers and strippers who were helping me to guide me, and I was really in service to that community to create something beautiful. And I was like quite far down the road on making it happen when I realized that actually the situation that's happening, not just in Vegas, but Vegas is particularly hard, is that there's a war happening. Like, this is an area of work. This is an area of work where these women have no job security. They're often having their wages stolen from them. They're in physical danger. They're being roofied. There's no other job that you can have where that would be an acceptable work conditions. And so the more I worked on the Stripper Parade, which obviously the original vision was that the strip clubs would pay for this because we're celebrating the strip clubs, right? So the strip clubs would buy a float on the parade, right? That was the original vision. And the more I realized, like, oh, actually, this is a protest. Oh, actually, this isn't a parade. We need to like help these people. And it turned into this. And then I was like, there's no business model here. And sadly, I don't have the resources to make something like that happen. I wish I did, you know. I really, really had such a passion for that project, but it didn't happen. And so that was a real wake-up call for me. I learned a lot about sex work. I learned a lot about Vegas, and it was a real ego blow to have to shut that project down. It was really, really hard. And so, you know, people often say that Vegas is a city that will take your dreams and eat them up and spit them out, you know, and that was mine. And after that, if you stay here, if you manage to stay, then, you know, after you've had your dreams, you know, chewed up and spat out by Vegas, then there's another level here of connection and beauty, and the community here is just really wonderful and authentic and supportive. There's so many artists here, and really, you know, the whole place kind of shifted for me after that. I think people often come here with a dream. And not many people, it doesn't happen for many people.
No,
for most people, their dreams are crushed. And that's part of arriving in Vegas.
Totally.
And that sounds depressing, but actually, like, Vegas is also a place that will hold you when your dreams are crushed. So, you know, even though that project didn't get to happen, and I was really, really very upset and destroyed by that experience, I was also then in a place where the hustle isn't quite as hard as other places, where you don't have to work so hard to survive, and where I just kind of grieved the loss of that project and tried to figure out what to do next with my life.
It's I think one of the amazing things about Vegas is that a lot of people who have done stuff elsewhere can come here and just relax a little bit and be themselves.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
Vegas has an opportunity for art and entertainment, but also just a place where those who are in art and entertainment can just hang out and not have the stress of trying to create more art and entertainment constantly.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because every step that I've taken in my life, I feel like I've relaxed a little bit more. So, being from London is a very hectic town. It is hard. It is big and it is loud, and it is really hard to make any kind of dent on anything there. It's like you have to be hugely successful to make any kind of dent on London, to have people know what you're doing, and you have to be really loud and really boisterous and really energetic. And then I arrived in San Francisco and I was at London volume. And I was like, everyone was like, whoa, who is this? Because West Coast is way more chill, right? And so then I was like relaxed into that. Oh, Bay Area. Oh, this is a bit more. Oh, this is chill. Okay, I got this. And then coming here, I feel like that's happened again in my life. Like I've taken another like
Your
another
fourth
breather.
rebirth.
Yeah. And each time I rediscover myself a little bit, you know, like I come in with an idea, like I arrived in the Bay Area like, I want to be a fashion designer. This is my calling. This is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And it only took like 2 or 3 years before I was like, this isn't what I want to do. This isn't what I want to do at all. And event production became my passion. Community building, immersive art, performance those things became my passion. I was like, the fashion stuff, I don't want to do that all day, every day. And now I'm at the point in my life where I'm like, I've been doing that for such a long time that it's just not sustainable for me forever. Like I'm going to have to stop doing event production at some point. I can't. It's just exhausting. It's physically very demanding thing to do. So now I'm like, now what do I do? I mean, obviously, you know, I wrote my book, which I really loved writing my book. And when I was finished with writing my book, people said, are you going to write another book? And I was like,
working on another one now?
And well, I was like, no, I'm never going to write another book again. That was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. There's absolutely no way I'm writing another book. Are you fucking kidding me? And I also felt this sense of, well, you know how raw this book is. It's very vulnerable. And I'm not normally that open about my personal family history and stuff. Like I just don't talk about this stuff to people. And so to put it down in writing was a really intense process. I had an editor who was really, really pushing me, and I just really wanted to make the best book that I could make. And she was saying things like, if you don't tell these stories where there's obviously pieces missing, then people will feel it and they won't trust you. Like, why do you think people want to read your memoir? Because they want to know you. So let it through. And so I did, but that meant that I was finding myself in situations where I felt really like exposed. I felt really vulnerable. I felt like I had shared too much, that it was very, very difficult for me to be like out in public and have people come up to me and say, I read your book. Like I just wanted to burst into tears anytime anybody said that. And so I kind of shut down a lot after that. I used to be much more of a public person. I used to have this like persona. I was an early influencer. You know, I was like very much at the forefront of social media and that whole idea of like branded humans. Like we talked about this in the early 2000s. We talked about social media before social media even existed, right? So we were like, this is a thing. This is what we need to develop, is this idea of this place that we can go, that's online. It's going to be on your phones and you can take it anywhere and you can challenge each other to creative things and tell each other when events are happening and post photos and all of this stuff. We had this idea that then, and people, when it happened, everyone was like, this is the thing you've been talking about. We were like, yes. So, you know, I feel like there was this very public aspect to my life where people felt like they knew me. And then I wrote the book, and then people knew me even more deeply. People were like, oh, that shallow Polly I knew before, now I know this Polly. And I just found it personally really challenging and difficult to deal with. And so in recent time, when I've been starting to write again and trying to be like, okay, how do I navigate this? Because I'm also not interested in the oh God, the arguments that people have on the internet. It's so fucking tedious. Like, I'm really not interested in the comments and shit.
Right.
Like, I'm really not interested in that kind of dialogue. I'm not interested in people tearing each other apart, you know, crabs in a fucking barrel. Like, no, I so don't care about that kind of interaction. And so, like, what am I writing? And like, I'm like, is it cultural commentary? What is it? Like, where like, I don't want to I have controversial ideas. Like, I don't want to put myself out there and be torn apart. Like, I'm a sensitive flower, Schwa. Like, I am.
I know, I read your book.
I'm really sensitive. I find it really difficult.
I had no idea, too. In fact, the Polly that I had known for 20 years was, this was an amazing enhance.
Yeah.
It just shined a light on who I had perceived you to be. And I had no clue until I read your book.
Yeah,
and
often.
it was very lovely.
Yeah, often after a kinky salon, I'm like floored for like 4 or 5 days. Like, it's really, really hard for me to recover from that level of being on and being out. Like, I'm quite an introvert, actually. So when I started to look at what I was going to write next,
Yes.
I was thinking, I was just looking on my hero, Lydia Yuknavitch, Shiro. One of my favorite writers of all time. When I read her memoir, A Chronology of Water, I thought I would never be good enough. I was just like, why? I'm just going to put this away now because I'm never going to be good enough, because Lydia writes so beautifully. And yet she's also an incredible inspiration. And she has an organization called Corporeal Writing, and they throw workshops and things, and during the pandemic it all went online. They had a space in Portland. They just closed it down, but anyway, so I took a class. I was like, I wanted to start writing again. I don't know what to write. I'm not really sure. Let me look and see what is going on with Corporeal. And I looked, and there was a speculative fiction workshop happening, and I was like, speculative fiction is my joy, right? It's my favorite genre when I'm reading. I love Ursula K. Le Guin. I love Margaret Atwood. I love, it's my favorite space to go when I'm reading. So I was like, why have I never considered writing speculative fiction before? I think because previously I used to say, I'm not a writer, I just have a story to tell. And that is a really easy way of stepping back from the pressure of announcing yourself as being a writer, because it's hard. It's a really hard thing to do. And I didn't have a lot of confidence in myself and in my skills as a writer. And so I used to say, I'm not really a writer. I just have a story to tell. And so now what I'm doing, and what I've been doing for the last, year and nearly 2 years now, is getting deeply involved in the craft of writing. And I've been really enjoying it. I took that speculative fiction writing workshop with Lydia, and I met Domi Shoemaker, who is who helps to put all of the workshops and stuff together for Corporeal, and they throw they call them community hours, virtual hours, where you can go and you can write together as community. You log on, you do a little introduction. They give you what they call a portal. It's not a prompt, it's a portal, because it just opens the door to writing. And then you write together, and then you read at the end of it. And it has just loosened up my process. It's helped me. It's been hugely influential. The first prompt portal that we did, I then became the opening of my new book, which is a novel that is a speculative fiction novel. And it's been such a fun thing to explore, because I can put my ideas into speculative fiction. I mean, obviously that's what it's about. Right. That's what it's about. that kind of literature is about cultural commentary. And so I'm really fascinated by utopian and dystopian fiction. Utopian is falling out of favor now, right? It's not as fashionable as it used to be. Everybody loves a dystopia now. Dystopia is like the craziest, hugest, most successful. Humans love to watch how humans are doomed. It's amazing, right? Which goes to your poetry thing that you've been doing.
We thrive on it as well.
Yeah. So I'm also really interested in the integration of utopian and dystopian fiction,
thank you.
because I'm interested in the integration of utopian and dystopian humanity, right? Like, the truth is, humans are kind of fucked, and they have fucked up the planet, and there is all these ways that people can be really evil, but then there's also like amazing, inspiring stories, and ultimately dystopian fiction has become utopian. Like, if you look at it, like, it used to be like, if you look at something like 1984 or like the really early dystopia stuff, it's just dark. It's just dark as fuck, right? Whereas now, when you look at things like the Hunger Games, like, that story is actually more about hope and humanity than it is about how fucked we are. Even though it is on this backdrop of being completely fucked, it's actually like a love story, and like, it's about humanity. So it's really interesting to me how utopia and dystopia have kind of combined, and there hasn't really been a pure dystopia where it's just like, we're just screwedly doodled since the 30s, you know? So anyway, I really enjoy that as a concept, as a literary concept, and as an idea. And so that's kind of where my stuff is going. It's very utopian. It has lots of stuff that's ideas about culture, and
we need more
like, because writing it out and giving it as an example does actually, like, put it in people's minds in a way. Oh, it's just fiction. But then also, we are fucked, and we are fucking the planet, and all of this stuff. So like, you'd be crazy if you're not putting that stuff in there as well. So it's a good combination of the two. It's a nice balance of utopia and dystopia.
I love that. I'm looking forward to reading that for sure. Which you mentioned, Ursula Le Guin. She does a great job of doing that for sure. Utopian within the dystopia.
So good. Yeah.
Damn.
That was a whoo.
Yeah. So, do you have a launch date?
For the new book?
New one, come
nowhere.
on, boy.
I'm nowhere near that, Schwa. I'm nowhere near. So where I am currently is that I've been writing kind of on and off, just like, is this what I want to be doing? Like, I haven't talked about it at all. This is the first time I've talked about it.
Yeah.
Hey. Welcome. Hi.
Yeah.
If I talk about it in public, does that mean I have to finish it now?
That's damn right.
But yeah, I'm a fair chunk of the way through it, and I've been really, really enjoying it and realizing, like, I'm learning now a whole new genre. So when I wrote my book, I learned how to write memoir. I'm not a trained writer. I didn't go to school. I don't have an MFA. Like, I'm self-taught, but also, like, I've taken a lot of workshops, and
You know the craft.
Yeah.
You're really good at storytelling.
Thank you.
You're polished enough, I think, to be on a level with everybody else.
Thank you. That's really nice of you to say, Schwa. And I'm learning this new genre now, and all of the other things that now entails. Like, memoir is one thing, disappearing, delving into memory, recalling those details, and all of that process. I'm really interested in that. But then and I use that a lot in my speculative fiction too, because my God, if you're not using real memories, then you don't feel the weight of it, right? So it is a lot of stuff, and it's a lot of stuff that I couldn't really talk about in the memoir as well. Stuff that I wanted to talk about, but was too difficult, and so I'm using some of that material now as well, which is good. Putting it into speculative fiction, hiding it in speculative fiction, and saying, it's not me.
It's a good place to put it. Yeah.
Yeah.
All the best do.
Yeah. And so recently, I've actually started to enjoy sharing the processes that I've been using, because I'm not a trained writer. I went to art school, right? I was trained as a painter and a sculptor, I went to art school originally, and then I turned my back on art. I said, art's a waste of time. Fashion makes more sense, right? Fashion makes more sense. Fuck the art scene. I'm going to be doing weird shit in the kink scene, right? That was where I went. And so I do have this training in art, and all of the weird things that I've done, my weird theatrics, my singing, my whatever it is, like a bunch of stuff that I've done that I'm putting together to create this kind of like multidisciplinary approach to teaching writing that I've been really getting into recently, and kind of like using my friends as little lab rats to do to do some writing retreats. So that's been really, I'm getting really into that as well now.
Well, and what I love too is that everybody's got a story to tell, and even the most creative people have some great stories to tell. You can put it down on paper, and you do it in you're able to tell the story and keep the reader captivated. And that's not easy for a lot of people that can tell stories. You might be able to tell a story in a group of people while you're hanging out and partying, but it's hard to actually put it on paper. And I always tell people that's the most difficult part. And you do a fantastic job, so I'm looking forward to seeing your fiction story.
Thank you, thank you. It's interesting too, like Dixie de la Tour and Bawdy Storytelling. That was an event in the Bay Area, and that has now spread really all over North America. And these are stories where people are telling stories about sex and sexual adventures as a way to kind of like demystify sex by having real people tell their real sex stories in front of an audience, kind of like the moth for pervs. Is how she describes it. And Dixie has a really interesting process for creating stories, and Dixie's helped me to kind of learn how to do that public speaking part of it too, and like how to do the storytelling, because I tell you what, that's hard too. The 10-minute no notes model is really hard. But yeah, the craft of writing, the craft of editing, and of refining is the polish is the part that I've been getting really into recently, and really enjoying, to the point of poetry actually. Which
you end your book with a little bit of that here.
And the new book has a lot of poetry in it. A lot of poetry. There's a whole voice, there's a whole character in the book that speaks in poetry. So that's been really fun too. And I realize, gosh, how much passion I used to have for poetry when I was young, and how much poetry I used to write when I was young. I mean, I know that's a like stereotype, isn't it? Like the tortured goth teen poet. But it's been really interesting to see how the economy of words that a poet uses, I've been really putting into my novel as well.
I love that. All right, so now you're in Vegas. What's your next, outside of writing? Any other exciting things that you got in store for us all?
Oh gosh. Well, I have a reading coming up right here.
You do. We're excited about that.
I'm excited about that too. I haven't read anything from my book in a decade. It's been 10 years since my book came out.
I can't believe it. It seems, as reading your book, it really feels like it was just the last 5 years.
I know, right?
Just, like, blows me away.
It's been 10 years since that book came out. And so I'm kind of revisiting some of the material in the book. And then also I will be sharing some stuff from my new...
Good. That's what I want. Yes.
Which is why... I have a lot of anxiety and feelings about that. But of course, if I didn't have anxiety, I wouldn't care enough. That's what I always say. And so, Kingi Salon is still chugging along in various cities. But really, what I've been doing is really enjoying my less hard work. I've been working less. I don't know if you realize, Shua, how hard I used to work. And it is in the past tense now, because I really don't work as hard as I used to work.
I feel the same way.
I used to work so... and I look back and I'm like, oh my God, what was I trying to do? I do think it's like this idea that you always have to be big and better and bigger and better and grow and grow and grow. It's just capitalism. Let it go. You don't have to be bigger. Do less.
I agree. I totally agree.
And it's about working, and I don't want to be like 4-hour work week fucking douchebag.
I do.
But I'm not. I love what I do, and I'm passionate about what I do. I will never retire. But I don't need to work as hard as I did. I'm not trying to change the world.
Well, and obviously,
anymore.
if you read the book, Polly, it brought you down. It brought you down. Working like what you did, even though you were creating magic for people, it still was exhausting for you, and it brought you down. And it's nice to see you not having to deal with that right now.
Yeah, I do a lot less events than I used to do. I mean, if you think about, there was a peak time in Mission Control where we were living and working in the same space, throwing events at least once a week, sometimes twice a week.
Yeah.
I mean, and that went on for a good 5 years.
Yeah.
And it was exhausting.
Yeah.
I mean, and also a lot of the events were sexy. And it was like, come on, Polly, turn it on. It's time to be hot and sexy. It's like, you know, those times when you just want to stay home in your pajamas and eat some ice cream and say, fuck, the last thing I want to do is go to a kinky salon.
Right.
I didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
And it's the irony of the space of liberation for so many people really was a trap for me, and it held me caged. And it's the irony of that is really deep, and also the fact that there was this community that everybody was a part of, but I was kind of separate from it. Like I was never really like on a level with everybody. I was always like working basically while everyone else was having fun.
And I loved how towards the end of the book, you talk about just cuddling up into Scott's arms, and Scott just says, are they fucking out there? Can't they think of anything new to do? Which is just, it's just, yes. You know, there's so much cake, you know, what do you do?
Boring.
Yeah.
Take your boring boner away from me.
I love that because after a while, you know, that's kind of how good times can become, for sure.
And I mean, it's still wonderful though. I still love Kinky Salon. It just happens a lot less often than it used to, and it also happens in multiple cities. I produce the events in Vegas, in LA, and in Oakland. And so that I've got that trifecta. There's also a few other communities in other cities that are still going and still throwing events. They've got teams locally that work on that and have complete ownership. It's not a franchise, it's a movement, you know. And in the pandemic, it shut a lot of them down. But there's still a few that are still going, and in the meantime, I throw them in these 3 cities, and that means I have more energy because there's 3 communities that are putting energy towards making it happen, rather than pulling teeth trying to get the same group of people to be creative and over and over again, month after month. Voluntelling, I call it. Voluntelling you to make art. You know, that's the worst.
Well, just to close this all out, because thank you for your time. I'm so glad to have you here, Polly.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's been lovely to talk to you.
Always good to see you. But as someone who's been involved with the polyamorous world, I'm always getting asked of thoughts and guidance. And what are some of the things that you would say to those who are involved or just getting involved with polyamory? What's some keys? Because we've learned the hard way, I think.
Hot tips. Well, you know, I think the most important thing about any kind of relationship style, any kind of alternative relationship style, is that there are lots of them. There are lots of different kinds of relationship styles. There are so many. There are as many relationship styles as there are people. And to really not be fixed. So I feel like monogamy became a cultural norm because of capitalism. It's a nice little capitalist unit, the family, of consumers. And so that's why that makes sense. It's like this fixed model that culture has gone, this is the one, let's fix ourselves on this. And that really shuts us down. So because there's some people who that doesn't work for. For some people, monogamy is great. And for some people, it doesn't work. And when you force one relationship style on everybody, there are going to be some people who are unhappy. And so I think the most important part is to not be fixed, whether that's in monogamy or in polyamory. After having been doing this for as long as I have, being in alternative relationships and weird, wonderful world for pretty much my entire adult life, you know, I really think that now there's a culture where within those communities there's pressure to be polyamorous or to be weird or to be kinky, or, you know, and then there's pressure in the opposite direction. And so whenever we're putting pressure on each other to be a specific way, I think is where the problems happen. And we all want to belong. We all want to be part of something. We all want to have family. We all want to be cool, you know, but just like create the life that works for you, and be honest if it doesn't work. If monogamy doesn't work for you, be honest. If polyamory doesn't work for you, be honest. And that is where you'll find happiness.
Well fucking said. Polly, oh my goodness, thank you. Polly Superstar, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
I want to thank Polly Whitaker for joining us on this episode of Avant Pop Bookstore Presents. You can get Polly Sex Culture Revolutionary, a memoir, at Avant Pop Bookstore in Las Vegas, or you can find Polly at pollysuperstar.com. Also, her community number is 702-996-4243 to find out what else Polly's got going on. The theme music for Avant Pop Bookstore Presents is performed by artist Dillashoe. And I hope you can join us again for another edition of Avant Pop Bookstore Presents.